The fifth generation Subaru Legacy carried over the old EJ series engines. Let us remind you that these motors entered the assembly line back in 1989. 2.0 EJ204 148 horsepower, 2.5 EJ253 170 horsepower, 2.5 Turbo EJ255 265 horsepower. Most often, Legacy in this body is found with a 2 or 2.5 liter naturally aspirated engine or a 2.5 liter turbo engine. The turbo version is often pumped, flashed and tuned by previous owners. All these engines are timing belt driven and do not have hydraulic compensators. The 2 liter has 2 camshafts in each cylinder head, phase regulators on the intake camshafts. The 2.5 liter has 1 camshaft and no phase shifters, but it does have a VTEC type system. The opening height of half of the intake valves changes from minimum to, let's say, normal. The turbocharged EJ255 is more similar to the 2 liter, 2 camshafts, 1 phase shifter in each cylinder head. What can you say about these engines? No matter what they say, a good half of them eat up the oil. The appetite for oil can be different, from half a liter between changes, to half a liter per 1,000 kilometers. In the latter case, of course, you need to send the engine for overhaul. If the owner does not save money and fills in original oil, not directly oil in Subaru cans, but oil from the supplier on the conveyor, and changes it at intervals of up to 8,000 kilometers, then the oil burner will not be bothered. By the way, the oil reserve in these engines is only 4 liters. Therefore, a decrease in oil volume as a result of oil consumption is fraught, among other things, with the rotation of the liners. Further, these engines easily and simply overheat, as a result of which gases from the cylinders blow through the cylinder head gaskets where the cylinder head becomes deformed. To prevent this from happening, you need to clean the main radiator on both sides and proactively replace a corroded or heavily stoned radiator. Let us also remember the problem of the knocking of the 4th cylinder. A knock is already a sign of scoring and wear on the cylinder bore in the area where the piston skirt fits. Of course, this can be caused by increased coolant temperature in the area of the 4th cylinder. By the way, the 4th cylinder is the one closest to the driver. There is also an opinion that the problem with the 4th cylinder occurs after removing and installing the engine, if servicemen tighten the mounting bolts with excessive torque, which leads to a slight, but still unpleasant bending of the block in the area of the 4th cylinder. In general, on the one hand, if the owner could afford an oil change every 5,000 kilometers and at the same time splurged on something that was really high quality and suitable for these engines, then Subaru Boxer engines easily last 400,000 kilometers or more. Otherwise, these engines die at mileages of up to 150,000 kilometers. 3.6 EZ36D 256 horsepower. The 5th generation Legacy imported from the USA has a 6-cylinder Boxer engine. This is a 3.6 liter naturally aspirated engine with a timing chain drive and 4 phase shifters. In essence, this is a reliable engine, but only if the owner does not spare high quality oil for it and monitors the radiators. There we caught up with fears. All those problems happen if you cheapen the service. 2.0 FB25 175 horsepower. Let's talk about other engines that were installed on the Legacy 5. On the 5th generation Legacy imported from the USA and Europe, the 2.5 liter engine is completely different from the new generation. The motor is designated FB25. It has a timing chain drive, 2 camshafts and a phase shifter, and hydraulic compensators. Its cooling system is more efficient. But the trademark problem with oil consumption, which ends with rotated liners and lifted cylinders, also occurs with him. 2.0 DEE20Z. Diesel Legacies arrived from Europe. This engine is very similar to the 2.5 liter FB25, aluminum block, timing chain, 2 camshafts. Fuel injection from the Japanese company Denso. Until the spring of 2010, these engines, especially when paired with a manual transmission, suffered from deformation of the crankshaft bed. Later versions of this engine are reliable and confidently last more than 300,000 kilometers. By the way, it is better to buy a diesel Subaru with a CVT. There will be no dual mass flywheel, and a torque converter will make life easier for the crankshaft. An engine cooling radiator with a transmission fluid cooler built into it, 8 to 10 years after operation in salty winters, can burst through the tubes through which this same transmission fluid enters it. The ATF will simply leak out. The main radiator is also rather weak, i.e. in hot weather does not provide sufficient engine cooling. Of course, the outer honeycombs of the radiator, dented by stones and clogged with dirt, greatly reduce heat transfer. The Subaru engine reacts to excessive heating with casual ease by punching the gasket of one of its cylinder head. In this generation, Subaru Legacy switched to a CVT. This transmission went to naturally aspirated Boxer engines. The brand name of such a transmission is Lineartronic, designation TR690. This variator is naturally installed longitudinally. Its working element is a pulling chain. A coupling is installed in the variator housing that connects the cart-end shaft, i.e. rear axle drive. Lineartronic is a very reliable CVT, probably the most reliable in the world in its passenger and all-wheel drive categories. It didn't become like this right away. For the first few years, until about 2012, it was improved and got rid of problems. It has several weak points. They appear during normal wear and tear. Its hydraulic block contains 7 solenoids. Solenoids are simply electromagnets that, in this case, drive spool valves. An electromagnet is a coil of wire, so, with runs of 200,000 kilometers or even more, breakdowns of the wire insulation in these coils occur. When one of the solenoids starts to malfunction, the operation of the variator is disrupted. You have to go to a service station to determine the faulty solenoid based on errors. Next, you need to remove the valve body and recheck the current resistance of the faulty solenoid. And then, you can simply remove the old one and wind the new wire of the correct diameter. As a result, you need to achieve the correct winding resistance. By the way, usually the wire insulation is destroyed on the very first. It turns or burns out almost completely. It is believed that this is due to old, contaminated transmission fluid and overheating. You can diagnose the health of the solenoids using a multimeter, taking data on the resistance of the solenoids through the pins of the electrical connector. Another problem with a variator is much less common and is the wear of the torque converter bushing. It was originally made of synthetic polymer and wore out quickly. The following symptom indicated its wear. When decelerating to a complete stop, the engine stalled, as if it stalled when decelerating in gear with a closed clutch. Under warranty and at production, the torque converter bushing was replaced with an improved one or a needle bearing was installed. With a mileage of more than 300,000 kilometers, a stalling engine just before stopping indicates age-related wear on the torque converter. As he ages, this symptom will appear more and more frequently. A special and unique liquid is poured into the Lineartronic variator. The original one is sold in 20-liter buckets and costs $720, KO425Y0711. This amount is needed to flush the variator until it is well clear through the drain hole, and after removing the pan, it is possible to drain 5 to 6 liters of ATF. And the total filling volume is 12 liters. Therefore, to preserve the resource of this variator, it is worth either partially changing the ATF every 60,000 kilometers or making a complete replacement with flushing every 100,000 kilometers. It all depends on the operation. Of course, the 2.5-liter Legacy has little drive, but if the owner manages to drive aggressively and quickly, then you shouldn't skimp on transmission maintenance. By the way, there is a scanner application that, communicating with the variator, estimates the oil life. Some people do just that. With such data, such owners manage to postpone the first replacement and flushing of ATF until 150,000 and even 200,000 kilometers. Note that the Lineartronic CVT does not like long driving at speeds of 150 kilometers per hour and above. You should not load it with slippage while the variator fluid is cold. 5-Street Automatic Transmission 5E, JR507E. On Legacy in this generation there is also a regular 5-speed machine. This transmission is available with a 2.5-liter turbo engine and a 6-cylinder naturally aspirated engine. This transmission is basically a Jatco JR507E unit. This transmission body has been modified for the Subaru layout. It also has its own valve body and solenoids. This machine is very reliable, but it often fails prematurely due to aggressive sports use. Problems are usually solved by replacing burned-out solenoids. You should not skimp on ATF for this unit, especially since oil prices are not high. Brake calipers on Subaru require minimal maintenance, lubrication of the caliper guides and replacement of the repair kit if necessary. In the absence of such maintenance, at least once every 2 years you can hear squeaking brakes, knocking noises when pressing the brake pedal and see uneven wear of the brake pads. If service calipers continue to rattle when driving over bumps, and not when pressing the pedal, then there is an option to use springs between the calipers and their brackets. The 5th generation Subaru Legacy was equipped with both an electric steering rack and a hydraulic one. The hydraulic option only applies to machines manufactured for the US market. Therefore, you will most likely come across a car with an electric steering rack. It has a widespread, but not affecting anything feature. The steering rack begins to tap. As a rule, a knock appears when the steering wheel is rotated in place or at low speed. The reason is simple: radial play due to wear of the steering rack. The cracker in this case is a bushing with a cutout for the rack shaft. The cracker is pressed from above by 2 springs. The degree of pressure is adjusted with a nut. The rack knocking was widespread on literally all Subarus, not only Legacy. It does not cause the rack to break and only annoys the driver. The most scrupulous ones contacted the dealer or changed the pressure springs to improved ones. The wheel bearings on these cars are inseparable from the hubs. They serve 120,000 to 170,000 kilometers. Front 28,373 FG000. Hubs will cost $160 and rear hubs will cost $130. Subaru's all-wheel drive is fine, but it is advisable to minimally maintain the driveshaft crosspieces because by 300,000 kilometers they may wear out. An all-wheel drive transmission needs an oil change at least once every 100,000 kilometers. The oil needs to be changed in both the rear gearbox and the manual transmission. Regarding all-wheel drive, we can report that the 5th generation Legacy had 3 types of all-wheel drive transmissions. If the car is equipped with a manual transmission, then it will have a symmetrical center differential, which is blocked by a viscous coupling. If the car is equipped with a 1st generation Lineartronic variator, and the 5th generation Legacy did not have another, then there is no center differential at all. The drive to the rear wheels is connected automatically using a wet multi-plate clutch. It is controlled by a separate solenoid. The clutch divides the torque in a ratio of 60-40 in favor of the front axle. If the 5th generation Legacy is equipped with a Turbo 4 or a 6-cylinder engine, the transmission provides permanent all-wheel drive with a torque distribution of 45-55 in favor of the rear axle. The center planetary differential is locked by a multi-disc clutch. This is a friction clutch built into the differential. The degree of blocking is adjusted automatically. At the front, the Legacy has a conventional suspension with McPherson struts. The suspension is reliable and durable. Perhaps the shortest service life is for the front stabilizer links. They take care of 50,000 kilometers each. The original will cost $18. By the way, as on many cars, the stabilizer torsion bar is painted, and after cracks appear in its paint, it readily rusts. Corrosion occurs especially quickly near the stabilizer bushings. It happens that in these places the corrosion is so strong that after cleaning the stabilizer bar will dangle in the new rubber bushings. As a result, you have to look for and buy a stabilizer without severe corrosion. It is better, of course, to preventively combat corrosion in these places. It is not necessary to change the entire front arms because both silent blocks and even the original ball are sold separately. The rear silent block can travel more than 150,000 kilometers, an excellent resource for $25. The front silent block and the ball joint for the lever cost about the same money. Original front control arms assemblies will cost $200 each. The support bearings of the front shock absorbers last more than 200,000 kilometers. The cost of the original is $85 each. 20320 OJ001. The rear suspension has 4 levers. Moreover, the upper arm has a ball joint. Its ball joint is not sold separately, and because of it you will have to change the levers after a mileage of about 200,000 kilometers or even later. Such levers cost $270. Silent blocks for the rear levers can be purchased separately from the levers themselves. They will cost $15 to $25. There are plenty of substitutes. As usual, let's talk about the body. Everything here is like any Japanese car from the 2000s. The layer of paint and varnish is thin. It all quickly scratches and chips. That is, if you bombard the car with pebbles and visit dubious car washes, the Legacy will quickly lose its elegant appearance. Corrosion resistance is normal. This means that for now, these machines and their age is less than 15 years, corrosion practically does not appear. The roof panel can be annoying with bugs. This metal readily blooms and swells around paint chips. Reflectors in xenon lenses burn out over time. The effect of xenon decreases. You have to think about replacing the headlights or restoring the reflector. Body position sensors can also become corroded and broken, after which it is not possible to adjust the headlights that have fallen down. Faulty sensors, there are only 2 of them in the suspension on the left side, have to be replaced. While they are working, it is worth cleaning and lubricating the joints of their rods. Sensors and their rods can be ordered from China. With a mileage of about 250,000 kilometers, it is not so rare that it becomes necessary to replace the damper unit in the ventilation system. It's not easy to get to, but you don't need to remove the entire dashboard. A faulty damper unit produces rustling and clicking noises, while the direction of airflow from the ventilation deflectors is constantly changing, up, down, or in the face. A new damper assembly, 72131 OJ051, will cost $100. In some cases, it is possible to repair it. Deal with worn contact tracks. Cars produced in 2010 to 2013 participated in a recall campaign related to the replacement of the front windshield wiper gearbox cover. In principle, the problem with the combustion of the wiper motor should be solved on all Legacy and Outback of this generation. By the way, the motor burned out in the winter if the windshield wipers were unable to park in the starting position due to snow.